Running a little late tonight. I apologize for that. We had a late patient. This never happened before, but we're going to get the show on the road. This is Menopause Part 2. I'm so glad to be with all of you tonight. Last week, I just want to go over, review some things that we talked about last week. Now, last week, we talked about how the endocrine balance of thyroid, the sex hormones, and the adrenals need to be in balance with the pituitary gland. When you get those in balance, it's a lot easier to go through menopause and to understand and regulate your system. Now, if we look at Part 2, now we're going to talk about some forms of treatment for different menopausal symptoms, some natural forms of treatment. So one of the things that you can transition with is an herb called chaste tree. And chaste tree really helps in the transition to menopause. It has a direct effect on pituitary signaling, so it'll support a normal hypothalamic pituitary axis. It's very safe. And it provides support for all aspects of the female hormone cycle, including the cessation of menstruation. Dose is 1 to 2 tablets a day. And I use an herbal company called MetaHerb, which has, in my opinion, probably the best herbs out there in terms of their purity and in terms of their concentration, in terms of their strength. They're extremely picky about their herbs. They're extremely picky about what they accept and what they reject. And I have a lot of confidence that when they say something is on the bottle, that's what you're getting. And that isn't always true with what you get in other stores and other places. And there's been studies done on that show that it actually happens in health food stores, it happens in drug stores, that what they have in the bottle, that they say is in the bottle, isn't always in there. And with MetaHerb, I can really trust that that's the case. So when you're transitioning into menopause, you want to start with the basics. Dietary modifications, we talked about that last week. Supporting digestion, hydrochloric acid, and bile. So if you don't have a gallbladder, you're going to need bile salts. Hydrochloric acid, you can get that with apple cider vinegar. And if apple cider vinegar doesn't work for you, we have supplements that have that in it. And then adrenal support, very, very important. So let's talk about the adrenals. They're the backup system for normal hormone production. You may or may not actually have adrenal dysfunction. Most people do, some people don't. Adrenal dysfunction is very commonly due to the hypothalamic pituitary axis deregulation. Hypothalamus sort of channels the emotions into the pituitary gland. When this is dysregulated due to any kind of dysfunction, that can cause dysregulation, and it may or may not be actual adrenal dysfunction. The key herb here is ashwagandha, and adrenal tonic can be a key formula, and that's this product right here. Adrenal tonic is the best product I've ever seen for adrenal function. It contains 4 herbs, 3 of which we're going to talk about: ashwagandha, rhamania, licorice, and echinacea. So maintaining normal blood sugar is also really critical for menopause. The key herb here is gymnema. We also use one called Cataplexa GTF, which is has a trivalent chromium, very powerful for helping to regulate blood sugar. Gymnema is an herb. Gymnema sylvestre is an herb. This is really, really good if you have sugar cravings. This really helps squash sugar cravings. Now, I know none of you out there probably crave sugar, but some people do, okay? Gymnema is a really good herb for that. Trace minerals, essential fatty acids in foods, food-based multivitamins should also be considered. Trace minerals, especially zinc, chromium, vanadium, manganese, magnesium, are all really important for blood sugar production or for blood sugar regulation. Nutritional and herbal considerations. Let's look at foods for adrenal support. These are all foods that really help support adrenal function. Almonds, yams, avocados, Brazil nuts, kale, walnuts, oranges, celery, kidney beans, dried figs. We eat a lot of this at home. Dried figs are quite high in fructose and fruit sugar, so I don't necessarily recommend those if you have a sugar issue. Celery is really high in organic sodium, which is important for adrenal function. But I would recommend that you eat some of this on a regular basis, even if you're not going through menopause. I mean, obviously I'm not, and we eat these at home all the time. I put avocados and walnuts in my smoothies on a regular basis. Herbs for adrenal support. Rhamania, we talked about that. Eleuthero, ashwagandha, licorice, and rhodiola. We have all of those here. And Rhamania, ashwagandha, and licorice are all in the adrenal tonic. Now, these are what we call adaptogenic herbs. Do you know what I mean by when I say adaptogenic?
No.
Okay. That's really important to understand. That means what they do is if something is too high, they bring it down. If something is too low, they bring it up. Okay, they help modulate your system and help it adapt to the stressors around you. Okay. So liver health is also very important. Why is liver important? It detoxifies. So if your liver is toxic and it's not detoxifying or doesn't have the necessary ingredients to detoxify, what happens?
You get sick.
Yeah, you eat those toxins, they just float around in you and they make you sick. And so liver detoxification is really, really important. If you have a toxic liver, if your liver is not detoxifying, we have several different things that would really help that a lot. Herbs and supplements. Weight and exercise is important. A healthy weight, really important in menopause. Poor adrenal function before menopause can lead to fat deposition in the lower abdomen. It's really important to exercise. And then proper testing to find out what is going on may be necessary. Now, testing is not always necessary if the foundational issues are addressed, like diet and digestion, adrenals, liver detoxification, exercise. And then if you have specific symptoms, we can give you specific support for that. We're going to talk about some of those symptoms here in just a minute. But these are the main things. Now the problem is in our culture, when women go through menopause and they hit the wall, part of the issue is that their diet isn't right, they don't exercise, and so what do they normally do? What happens there a lot of times? They don't have any of this under control, so they go get pharmaceuticals, right?
Of course.
They get drugs. So they get drugs to deal with the symptoms that are being caused by the fact that their lifestyles are not in order as they should be. Okay, so diet, digestion, this is really, really important. adrenal, second liver. All of this is very, very important. And I found just personally that regular exercise is one of the best things there is for digestion. I mean, if you exercise regularly, that really helps digestion, elimination, gut health. Very, very good for that. So, key herbs to consider as you're going through menopause. Wild yam is the first one, wild yam complex. It has black cohosh in it, the wild yam, and that is right here. Well, and I'll read in a minute what wild yam has in it, but this is a key herb. Tribulus, we'll talk about that in just a little bit, what that does, very important. What about hot flashes? Hot flashes is usually decreased estrogen and increased follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH, are thought to be triggers. It's strongly influenced by the limbic system, by the hypothalamus. The limbic system is the seat of our emotions, okay? So as you know, as depending on if you're really emotional or you're going through a really emotional time, that funnels down through the hypothalamus into the pituitary, and then that the pituitary is what releases the hormones that you need. So if this is really imbalanced here, the pituitary is going to release hormones in certain ways. It's going to cause problems. Stress and blood sugar fluctuations are also triggers for hot flashes. So if you're under a lot of stress, you're eating a lot of sugar, or you eat a lot of, you binge on sugar a lot, that can make a difference. Excess cortisol production can cause an increase in the body's core temperature. So what causes excess cortisol? You guys know?
Stress.
It starts with an S.
Stress.
Ends with an S.
Stress.
Stress causes excess cortisol. Okay. So let's look at some of the causes of hot flashes. Stress is number one. Too much sugar, anxiety, excess weight, caffeine, insomnia, refined carbohydrate intake, which is too much sugar, poor liver function. Why would you have poor liver function? What would cause that? Anybody?
Well, you might have poor liver function because of everything above.
Yeah, yeah. And plus, eating the standard American diet, which is loaded with chemicals, and you just overload the liver's ability to keep up. So, eating lots of packaged, processed food. So, give me an example of some packaged, processed food.
Lunch meat.
Yeah, that'd be one for sure.
White bread.
White bread, yeah.
Frozen dinners.
Frozen dinners, yeah. That sounds like the voice of some experience over there. How about breakfast cereal? That's my favorite all-time bad food. I mean, I won't go near that stuff. So processed breakfast cereal, like Cheerios, full of glyphosate. Breakfast cereals full of pesticides. And so anything like that you want to avoid. And those things cause liver dysfunction. Here's another thing, the outgassing of like new paint or new furniture that outgasses flame retardant. Anything in the home that you get that outgasses chemicals is hard on your liver. You know, if you're spraying your lawn with chemicals, that's another thing. And I've talked about that a lot. Smoking, general endocrine insufficiency, and weak digestion. Well, if you're doing all this, you're going to have weak digestion. So, and this can be corrected. Weak digestion can be helped with just good pancreatic enzymes, apple cider vinegar, hydrochloric acid, and getting adjusted really helps the digestion because you're balancing out the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, which is really important for digestive health. So hypothalamus is a key player. It's like the ringmaster in a circus, okay? And all central nervous system information is filtered through the hypothalamus. So there is support for the hypothalamus. We have several different products that support the hypothalamus. Decreasing estrogen levels affects the hypothalamus. Providing estrogen precursors will, it's a half a word, will occupy receptor sites, and temperature fluctuations can really calm when you do that. We're going to talk about estrogen precursors here. Wild yam complex has estrogen precursors. They can really help with estrogen withdrawal. Wild yam is an excellent source of those phytochemicals. So that's wild yam complexes right here. Now, here's what you have in wild yam. You have wild yam root, shatavari root, and I cannot remember what that does. I'll have to look that up. St. John's wort, sage, we'll talk about all of these here in a minute. Korean ginseng, black cohosh, that's what wild yam complex contains. It provides support for all the menopause symptoms: hot flashes, insomnia, mood, fatigue, poor memory, weak stamina, and decreased libido or sex drive. So black cohosh. Yeah. Black cohosh, you can get this in a liquid, and this helps a lot with menopause. It helps with vaginal dryness and discomfort. It improves mood, sleeplessness, anxiety, nervousness, night sweats, and overall energy. So you take about 2.5 milliliters a day, which is a half teaspoon a day. Multiple studies show that it helps women transition off estrogen replacement therapy. It has a positive effect on dopamine and serotonin. It's a general tonic for any menopausal woman. And here's the thing about black cohosh: you never exceed the recommended dose. This is one that you can overdose on. Now, you're not going to die if you overdose on it. You just won't feel very good. You may not sleep. You just take a half teaspoon a day. That's all you need. Sage. You take about 4.5 mils a day, which is 2 teaspoons. It reduces excessive sweating. There's a small trial that showed complete elimination of hot flashes in 20 of the 30 women studied. Supports nervous exhaustion or debility. Also good for memory, tension, headaches, and joint pain. Again, recommended dosages, you don't exceed it. I mean, this isn't something where like more is better. And so often, sometimes I think especially in Nebraska, but everywhere, we think that if a little bit is good, more is going to be a lot better. It's like Nebraska football. If you hit them hard, that's good, but if you hit them really hard, that's even better. Well, that doesn't always work. That doesn't always work with sage or with some of the other ones. Let's look at tribulus. Tribulus, you take 2 tabs twice a day. Tribulus is really good for just modulating hormones. Now, the tribulus is sourced from Bulgaria, which has the highest levels this is the most concentrated tribulus that you can get. So, Bulgaria has the highest levels of this, and this is where we get our tribulus from. So, tribulus helps relieve menopausal symptoms, really good for fertility and libido in men or women. In men, it modulates testosterone, so it'll bring it up. Really good for men that are having sex drive issues. It can be combined with wild yam. It helps with estrogen receptors and excellent for any type of female or male hormone dysfunction. What about vaginal dryness? Vaginal tissue is really rich in estrogen receptors. So when you start losing estrogen in the body, this is what causes the vaginal atrophy. The symptom is only an expression of hormonal dysfunction. So black cohosh can help with that. But what I use here is vaginal suppositories. And these are estriol creams that really work pretty well. Use daily for 7 to 14 days, then every other day for 2 weeks, every 3 days for 3 weeks, every 4 days for 4 weeks, and then weekly or as needed. So these are refrigerated, we keep some on hand, and they work really well. Gotu-kola complex helps promote tissue integrity, really helps with collagen and connective tissue. They call it facelift in a bottle, okay? Helps heal any body tissue. Excellent adjunct for any of these problems that we've talked about. Wheat germ oil. This is a favorite product of mine. If you don't have an intolerance to wheat germ, which some people do, wheat germ oil is powerful hormone precursor. I mean, I give this to men. When I want to elevate testosterone in men, I give them wheat germ oil. Wheat germ oil and tribulus probably elevate testosterone as well as anything. It's very, very good. Some people have an intolerance to it, but certainly not everybody. So if we do the vaginal dryness recap, you need to do all the things we talked about, and then use one or more of the following, and the vaginal suppositories as needed. So black cohosh, wild yam, gotu-kola, or wheat germ oil. So what about low mood and depression? This happens a lot with menopausal women. It's due to declining estrogen levels. Average onset is 46 to 48 years old. St. John's wort is almost specific for menopausal depression. And we have probably as good a St. John's wort as there is in the MetaHerb tabs. And here's the wheat germ oil right here. Okay. Wild yam complex is helpful, and Kava Forte, which is really good for anxiety. St. John's wort is shown to provide the greatest benefit for improving mood and emotional state. It's really good for mild to moderate depression. You can take it if you're taking an antidepressant drug. It won't interfere with that. If you don't see any change in 4 to 6 weeks, you just stop taking it because it's not going to work. 4 to 6 weeks. Another quality of St. John's wort benefit. St. John's wort is powerfully antiviral. Really good for shingles. Okay, so I have a couple of products for shingles. St. John's wort would be one of them. Powerfully antiviral. Kava, really good for anxiety, appetite, concentration. All of these are really helpful with kava. Loss of interest or pleasure in life, anxiety, sleep, suicide. Kava is good for all of that. Okay. So, any questions about anything that I've gone over?
Now, you were talking about just menopause. What about women that are premenopause, but they have had like a hysterectomy, and so their body automatically starts going into menopause? These can help them as well?
Oh, yeah. Like ovaries out?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
surgically induced menopause.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely can be helped by this. Yes. Yeah, when you take out the ovaries, you're basically taking out one third of the triangle that we showed. So they really need some sort of replacement to help the body deal with that. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's when your adrenals kick in, because your adrenals produce estrogen when your ovaries don't. But if your adrenals are exhausted or fatigued, they can't do that. So that's when you'd really want to ramp up and make sure the adrenals are working well. They've got to make up for some of that. They can't make up for all of it. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Marilyn, for coming tonight. And hopefully all of you out there in Facebook land will get something out of this. We can provide some notes for you if you want to come by the office. And this will be up for what, a week? 7 days before we take it down, so you can watch it. If you want to come by the office and get the notes, we'll be happy to give those to you. Thank you very much.